as often happens with historical movements, and like we're seeing now, history happens, and mostly people just get run over by it, and they're not prepared. And that's what happens a lot through this narrative. And what I was trying to reflect, one of the things I had in the back of my mind is how things have changed, and we see how some of those things are playing out. AIDS, environmental questions, especially around activism, pipeline protests, hydro protests, which are a sort of a sub-theme of the book that runs throughout the whole thing.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Community Foundation in support of the Adirondack Community Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities. Wow.
Ay caramba, la policía.
You know that episode where Bart is sent to the he's sent to France on the foreign exchange program, and he is basically forced to create wine for this. You don't know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
It's a super old episode of The Simpsons.
Well, I probably did at some point, but my brain cells are locked on, batting averages from the 80s.
Why is that what you're thinking about right now?
I'm not saying it's what I'm thinking about right now. I'm saying that, like, at some point, my brain became full of batting averages.
Oh, and it replaced all the Simpsons knowledge.
And I was not able to store all of the Simpsons knowledge that you were able to store by virtue of being younger than me.
Well, at some point, I also liked baseball, but it didn't replace my love of the Simpsons. My love of The Simpsons replaced all of my baseball knowledge.
Well, and see, I simultaneously enjoy both baseball and The Simpsons, but there is not enough room for both of them in this small head.
As we were walking down the hall and we were singing.
Well, wait. What about the Bart going to France?
We're way past that.
So you're singing Blue Bayou, which is also a baseball reference.
We're singing Blue. It is?
Go ahead with your little story, and I'll go on with mine.
My little story? Excuse you. This is an important story. We're walking down the hall. We're singing Blue Bayou, and it's making me think about this movie called Dreamcatcher. Not a great movie. Also not a great book. But one of the cool concepts from that is the idea of the memory palace, and it's where you store literal files of all of your memories. And at a certain point throughout that story, characters are going through and they're getting rid of files and putting it in the incinerator so they can make room for new memories. Yeah, so do I. And so this conversation about replacing Simpsons knowledge with baseball facts and vice versa is making me think about that. I've often tried to visualize that to merge.
No, so to purge.
Oh, to purge. I thought you were saying merge baseball and The Simpsons.
Well, you could.
I could.
Use
like a mnemonic device to remember all of them.
I was thinking of the Talking Baseball song that Terry Cashman re-recorded as a Simpsons Talking Baseball song.
Talking softball.
Yeah.
And I never knew that was a real song because I only knew the Talkin' Softball, Ozzy on the Straw. I didn't know the original until you sent it to me. You sent it to me, and it just it was so uncomfortable to hear it because for 30 years I've been listening to Talkin' Softball, Mattingly and Canseco, Talkin' Softball, and to hear the original version was like I'd stepped into an alternate dimension. Yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Blue Bayou, and I sometimes get this story wrong, so forgive me, baseball lingo people, of which I thought I was one. But there was a point at which when people knew more Linda Ronstadt music, I think they sometimes referred to a fastball as a Blue Bayou because it blew by you.
Oh, I get it. Can I fact check you? Can I Google check you?
Yeah, you can absolutely Google it because I know the two things are wrapped up together, but it's been long enough and my brain is enough of a sieve today that I might not be 100% correct here.
Okay, at least according to Google AI, which I don't normally trust.
And Google AI played shortstop for the Padres in the 90s, I think.
Sponsored by Google Meet. And yeah, according to Google AI, slang for a fast-moving pitch. If you had gone pro, What do you think your position would have been?
It would have been second base, and I say this as a way of, I don't know, is it name dropping? It's not really name dropping, but I played 3 years of college baseball. True story. I was a pitcher and a second baseman.
Okay.
And then right after I graduated, I went to a tryout camp for the Cincinnati Reds.
You did?
Yeah, it was an open tryout.
Okay.
You had to have played at a certain level or above.
Okay.
And I played 3 years of college baseball, so I went. It was I was back home in Maryland, and the camp was at a college in Northern Virginia, and I knew as a 5'6" person that I wasn't even going to get a look as a pitcher because, yeah. Anyway, but I played enough second base in college and in high school, actually, that I tried out as a second baseman, and I did really well at the tryout camp. I also was under no impression that I was going to, get an offer.
Right, you did it just to do it.
Exactly that. And so I think the highlight of that experience was they made everybody take batting practice, but the way they did batting practice, they had a batting practice pitcher, and you got one swing.
And
I hit a double off the center field fence.
You were pretty good.
Yeah, well, the problem was I could hit, but I was really slow, and so I barely legged out the double. I had to run as fast as was humanly possible, despite the fact that I had hit the ball off the center field fence.
That's cool, and forever you can say that you tried out for the Cincinnati Reds.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
Just so that I could do it on this podcast today.
You know, I tried out for Foghat on the drums.
Did you really?
No.
Thought maybe they were coming to Akwesasne or something.
My dream is to perform with Foghat. No, that's not true. My dream is to be the drummer for John Fogerty performing Creedence Clearwater Revival songs. That's probably not going to happen.
Molly Hatchet?
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's another band.
I don't know them. What do they do?
That's what you've got Google AI for, your buddy.
That's what. Don't ever say that again. That's what makes this show fun. The generational divide.
Yes, boy.
And that kind of brings us to a perfect segue for today's look back conversation, because we just wrapped up the Winter Olympics and we're looking back to the 1980 Winter Olympics on today's conversation.
Yeah, so many pictures of the U.S. gold medal winning hockey team winning the gold medal in their game against Canada over last weekend, and so many of those pictures have been compared to the iconic picture of the U.S. men's hockey team celebrating their win over the Soviets in 1980, which folks may actually recall was not the gold medal game. It was to get into the gold medal game, but still, it was a huge deal.
Triumphant.
Yeah. And so our book today is set right around the time of the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. It's by a regional author, Chris Shaw. The book is called The Manager, and it's set, like I said, in Lake Placid and Saranac Lake in the time from the 1980 games onward, and opens with this mysterious guy being picked up as a hitchhiker outside the Casa del Sol restaurant in Saranac Lake. I met up with Chris Shaw, who has taught writing and been an editor and writer for a long time. I met up with him in the recording studio at Middlebury College in Vermont. Chris Shaw, thank you so much for taking some time.
And likewise, Mitch, thank you so much for doing this. I'm very grateful.
I feel like, so we're doing this interview in the basement of Axon Hall at Middlebury College, just downstairs from where your office was for many years. Is that right?
Yes. I don't know how many years I was in this office, but it was probably 15 or 16. And I was here often. I mean, I had other offices for 4 or 5 years before that.
As I was reading the book and driving over here this morning and thinking about where we were meeting, it dawned on me the right place to have done this interview probably would have been Casa del Sol in Saranac Lake.
That would have been a good place.
That is where the book opens.
Yes, it is.
You know, the thing that really hit me as I was reading this, in a strange way, it made me nostalgic for the Cold War.
That is strange, Mitch. I kind of understand. I mean, what was I trying to do? I mean, I had this notion that if I set it back a few years from when, I was actually an editor in Lake Placid, it would harmonize more with the politics of the time. So pre Gorbachev in the Soviet Union, I thought it would make it a little closer to the Miracle on Ice hockey game, which is still in people's memory in 1982 when the book opens. The opening in front of the Casa del Sol, where Walter Loving picks up a mysterious hitchhiker, actually took place. It's one of the few things that actually happened autobiographically in this book. It was probably more like 88, 89.
You picked up a hitchhiker. I mean, I'm not surprised by that, but a mysterious hitchhiker by the Casa del Sol.
In the snow, wearing a black top coat and a gold Rolex, and no hat and no gloves and no boots. And unexplained what he was doing out there in the snow, in the near dark, 4:30, 5 o'clock in a late February evening. And I drove him in the snowstorm over to Lake Placid, and he had we didn't talk much, he had a Slavic accent. And I dropped him off at the Hilton, and it stuck in my mind, who the hell is that? At the time, so it must have been, I'm thinking maybe it was 87 before the 88 Calgary Olympics. Because there
Probably
were,
before the wall fell, too.
I don't remember. When did the wall fall?
89.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There were actually like lower level games going on preparatory to whatever the next Olympics was. I forget whether it was Sarajevo or Calgary. But I thought, who is this guy? What's he doing in town? What was his accent? I never found out. I never really pursued it. I talked to people, a couple of people about, who traveled with Soviet and East German teams, and it turns out they always had security with them. And it turned out that, I think, which we knew at the time, that athletes did try to defect and escape or ask for asylum when they were traveling abroad, and rarely succeeded. So, I put this thing aside forever. I mostly forgot about it. And every once in a while, I thought, well, maybe I'll try something with that thing that happened, because who knows what it was. Never took it seriously. I wrote 2 books after I retired. I went to Mexico to spend the winter. I went down there thinking I wouldn't write anything. I would just read to prepare for this other project and some travel I was going to do in the spring. And I said, well, maybe I should try to write that thing about the hitchhiker as a short story. And it just ran with me for 7 weeks and 150 pages. Nothing like that had ever happened. I woke up in the morning. I sat down. I knew what was going to happen next. It just came together on its own. Now, did I throw everything in the way I did with the other novel? Yeah, I just threw everything in and let it run. And then I got home with 150 pages and half a novel, and I was stuck with now a problem, which was, what am I going to do? I mean, I think I have to finish this, which then required another, re-entry into that fantasy zone. When it turned out, I showed it to some people to read. I did a little editing and rewriting, and I got good readings on it. I mean, I was very unsure about it.
It sounds like you're almost an innocent bystander, and it just sort of hit you.
It sort of did, and I was always, very skeptical of it, actually, because I don't do genre, I don't do plot, really. So it was the first thing I ever, first plotted story I ever did in my life. I was avoiding, spy genre kind of stuff. So, I had in my mind a little bit Graham Greene, right? Just in the back of my mind, for whom, the espionage flavor is kind of in the background, and his people who are attached to MI5 or the CIA and the Ugly American or whatever are just sort of dorks. Who are on the scene and just kind of screwing things up for whoever is trying to keep the peace or do good, right? Or just get by in the case of The Ugly American or The Heart of the Matter. So that's Walter's problem is, here's this kind of espionage plot from outside somewhere landing in the middle of his, remote backcountry existence and, screwing up his romantic life and everything else. And he feels compelled to help this one a person who appeals to him for assistance, who turns out to be this, spectacular Soviet skater and writer.
I think the thing that kind of makes it really appealing, Walter as a character, he's not an ugly American exactly, but he is kind of clueless about this whole world that he finds himself thrust
Completely.
into. And the thing that maybe amused me the most about the situation that he's in is he's an editor of a regional magazine, another autobiographical element to this for you. And so as he is getting more in the espionage world that he finds himself in, he still has to do all the things that go into running a magazine in Lake Placid, like assigning stories about resorts and restaurants.
And getting calls from
freelancers wondering where their checks are. And
well, not only that, but the director of the local semi-public institution that runs all the ski areas and Olympic venues, who did not like my storytelling or editing. That is actually a little bit of autobiography right there. His name, Ted Farkas, kind of echoes with his model's real name of those days. My only regret with using that bit was that his string of invective and profanity was much better than I could ever reproduce.
Although there's an impressive string of invective and profanity that finds its way into this book.
Yeah, not as good as his.
I guess the other thing about setting this book when you did, and it opens in 1982, but it moves forward into 84 and beyond. And there are a lot of other things that are going on in the world. I mean, Gorbachev becomes the Soviet premier, and the relationship between the superpowers has changed. But as we find out, that doesn't necessarily mean that the characters who were executing their nation's agendas have changed. Obviously, we don't want to give too many spoilers here, but I sort of found it interesting, like the idea. I mean, it's a spy novel, so we have people who, and I won't say who.
It's not a spy genre novel,
right? No, it's not a spy genre novel, but there are some of the. I hesitate to use the word tropes,
No, tropes is okay. There are
right.
a couple. I mean, this is the problem I was starting to talk about before. Once you introduce a spy, it's either going to be look like just I don't know what, but you're stuck with certain expectations. There are going to be expectations on the reader's part. So I kept wondering, oh God, do I have to do some fancy kind of tech research? No, I'm not doing that.
Well, right. So there are no exploding cufflinks or nobody's driving an Aston Martin with a smoke screen that comes out of the back.
It's all very analog.
But there are people playing both sides of the fence.
Totally.
And that.
Well, everybody is.
Well, right, exactly. And so we're clearly not giving anything away. But that kind of interests me because the fences. I think the place of the fence is moving as the book plays out.
Well, that's a better way to put it. That's exactly what happens. As often happens with historical movements, and like we're seeing now. History happens, and mostly people just get run over by it, and they're not prepared. And that's what happens a lot through this narrative. And what I was trying to reflect, one of the things I had in the back of my mind as I was writing, and it's kind of almost too obvious, is how things have changed since those days and what we remember. And that's so when I bring it forward in time toward the very end, we're closer up to, now. And we see how some of those things are playing out. AIDS, environmental questions, especially around activism, and pipeline protests, hydro protests, which are a sort of a sub-theme of the book that runs throughout the whole thing. And I actually incorporated an old novella into part of the novel to make that clearer. A novella I had never published or ever even sent out, but it was always kind of in the background, the origin story of some of these characters.
Well, and it's worth noting that even just in the times between when you finished writing this novel and the time that the novel came out, the fences seem to have changed even more. And maybe that's what got me nostalgic about the Cold War.
Well, I can see that.
I think understanding the U.S.-Soviet relationship circa 1982 is maybe a lot easier to wrap one's head around than understanding the U.S.-Russian relationship circa 2025.
Very true, Mitch. I have many things to say about that, which I will refrain from saying on the air. But
invective and profanity being not the best part of it.
Well, it definitely echoes, and I didn't intend that, but I got to the end and I saw where I was, and the echoes have gotten stronger since I finished the book. So what you say is very true, and it goes along with my lack of intention to ever write this, and the sort of the accidentality of it. And that's also a good thing to trust in terms of the creative process. You don't always have in mind what's coming. There isn't a list of next projects. I mean, there is, but it largely gets thrown out because one like this comes along and bites you on the rear end. So and you just have to go with it. And these characters owned me from the very beginning.
They owned you from the very beginning, as opposed to you owning them.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are completely fictional. Some of them have vague relations to living or unliving people, very vague. Mostly, I mean, let's be very specific and say, I never did 99% of the stuff in this book. If you think that I did, then woo, because Walter's a little more extreme than I was in those days. But he also goes through some significant changes as a result of his manifold failures throughout the book that put him and a lot of other people in danger, and he is forced to reckon with.
For you, I mean, was it unusual to have such an obvious starting point? I mean, the idea of picking up a mysterious hitchhiker in the snow, wearing a top coat and a Rolex in front of the Casa del Sol is kind of the ultimate starting point for a novel. It's hard to imagine like a more like straightforward origin point for a story to emanate from. Does that happen to you very often? I mean, not picking up hitchhikers in the snow, but...
Never. And I wouldn't have thought so myself when I started this book. Thank you for saying that. In retrospect, it seems like what you're saying is true. And
it's like a gift almost.
I'm sorry?
I mean, it's almost like a gift.
Well, it was a total gift. I didn't see it as one until I started to write it. It just appeared. At least those first 150 pages, the arc of it was all right there. And I'd never had that happen before. I've always been very slow, very painstaking. I rewrite too much as I go along. I was just talking to somebody else in the studio here recently about the Dylan movie, which, whatever you think of it, I sang along with every song, even though it's not a perfect film. But there's a scene in which Joan Baez wakes up in Dylan's apartment in the Greenwich Village, and she's saying, well, I write songs too, and little Bobby is there in his underpants and smoking, lighting a cigarette, and he says, "You try too hard." And I just thought, well, that's the secret of Dylan right there. After you have some craft, after you have some skills and a sense of where you're going, then you can just sort of let it flow. I never had that experience. Part of it is, aging for me. And I was, sort of entering this stage that Edward Said, the literary critic, called late style, where, certain artists, thinkers, other scientists get to a point late in life where their career, if they had one, was behind them, and the need to produce in a certain way, matters of form, matters of needing to be even understood or comprehended. So he uses they fall away late in life, and this other kind of work emerges that sort of needs to find its way out. And it's less concerned with form. It's less concerned with career. It's less concerned with certain of the expectations that come, early in a creative career. I never saw that happening. I never saw it coming. But when I retired in 2018 from teaching, I had a finished novel that I pulled out of a drawer that turned out to be better than I remembered. I found that I had entered that stage of late style, and I found that aging and being beyond any question of making it was very liberating.
All the more amazing that Dylan figured it out so young.
Well, there are many questions about, how that happened. And I it's a mystery to me to this day where any of those songs came from. I don't want to talk about Dylan and this whole thing, except for the fact that when I drove south this past fall or January, I listened to music much differently than I did when I was actually performing and, hanging around with musicians. Songs get stuck in my head, and I'm not as comfortable with that as I used to be. So I don't listen to albums that much anymore. I don't listen to melodies that much anymore. I listen to mostly like jazz shows and stuff like that. But this time I took, one massive compilation of Dylan bootleg recordings that I'd never heard in my life, from very early until, pretty late in the 70s. And I was just amazed by some of it. Some of the songs I knew, but they were takes I hadn't heard. One of the things I realized was how often he is echoing old songs, echoing and even stealing from Tin Pan Alley, old English ballads, Appalachian tunes, blues, from all over the map, from literature, from poetry. He weaves it, he doesn't weave it in, he just throws it in, right? And then makes use of it in a new kind of way. And, certain people have objected to that. And it's like it's stealing. It's not original. No. He's doing something else with it that's kind of brilliant. And that keeps the work going, right? In other words, even a song like Hour When the Ship Comes In is an amazing poem and song. It echoes the quality of a 19th century shanty or 18th century story ballad. And that's a secret, that the need to be original all the time can be very killing. And Borges himself said that there aren't any new stories, get over it. But look at what he did. He completely, sort of reinvented the Latin American short fiction. And it's something called, magic realism, which Marquez figured out. You just state anything, sort of, it seems kind of magical in a completely matter-of-fact way. Those writers were also doing the same thing, or just, as Marquez always said, he was just telling the stories of his grandmother exactly the way she told them, and that was the reality that they lived in.
Well, so then getting things back to Chris Shaw,
Sorry.
I wonder. Oh no, it's fine. So you mentioned the 99% of the stuff that Walter does is not from your own history, and that the people who inhabit this novel are fictitious. There is one exception, and she is a working photographer in the Adirondacks.
Yes.
What is Nancy Battaglia doing in this novel?
Well, she's not the only one. There are a couple of other real people in there. And my son was talking to my grandson the other day when I gave them copies of this book, and he said, "You'll find that your grandfather uses real people along with fiction people." And he was right. So, well, look, I mean, when I was at the magazine, Nancy was about as dependable as you could get, and the New York Times made use of her for many years. She shot the Olympics more than once, and other international sports events around the area and elsewhere. And we see each other every couple of years, and have stayed in touch. And it just seemed natural when Walter winds up in Sarajevo later in the book, doing a small job for the New York Times, a freelance job. It's a job he gets through Nancy Battaglia's connections there. Her last name is only mentioned by the character who's actually the manager, the Soviet agent. Igor Chernyenko.
Did Nancy know she was going to be in this book?
So here's a problem with doing this. There are always people that you have to warn ahead of time. You know what I mean? So, don't know any writers if you don't want to, wind up
Show
in
up
a
in their
book.
fiction, yeah.
Yeah. So I kept thinking as I was writing, she's like, I have to, I'm going to have to tell Nancy this. And, so I finally get books in hand, and I thought, almost like she would have just known, right? But she didn't. So I called her a couple of weeks ago. I said, Nancy, you got a book coming. You're in it. And she was like, oh, great. Glad to hear it.
And she's not, she's as likable a character. I mean, she's not.
No, she
not
doesn't
a
really
major
have
character
anything to
in
do.
Right. She has no lines, I don't think.
No.
Or very few.
Oh, she's got a couple of lines. And she's there. I mean, we see her. She delivers her, film. It was before digital. So it's, she's, having contact sheets developed, and she and Walter are looking at them together and deciding, what to send to the Times editor.
Was it at all nice to revisit this time in your life when editing a magazine was your thing?
Was it nice?
I don't know if that nice was kind of the worst.
Well, it was okay.
Adjective I could think of.
I think for me it was a huge time. There's no question about it, and I learned a lot, and I met wonderful friends who have remained friends to this very day, some of whom are kind of echoed in here. Yeah, but it was significantly also incredibly important time in the Adirondacks. It was the beginning, we saw the first, that summer of red tides, I think it was 88, 87, I forget, of serious heat. We knew things were going very wrong environmentally at that point. We didn't know how bad, but we could see it coming, and we were all talking about it. Black Tuesday or Monday or whatever the hell it was happened, while I was there in the late 80s. AIDS was really changing people's behaviors. So, yes, we see how people behaved around romance and sexuality before the AIDS crisis and during, as time goes forward in the book. There are gay characters in here, as there were, of course, all over the Adirondacks and back then, and we didn't really talk much about her. And that's much different today, I'm happy to say. In a lot of ways, I think the Adirondacks are in much better shape today than they were then, in terms of certain aspects of civilization, of just...
It was kind of the Wild East in a way in those days.
It was, and very simply in terms of good food, it was hard to get good food in the wintertime, we ate a lot of canned stuff and bulk stuff from all the little co-ops that got formed and stuff like that. So it was a time of change, and that's the kind of time and the kind of landscape that draws certain kind of dramatic possibilities around it. So was it a nice time for me? Well, it was a confusing time for me, but it was a very important time. And I learned a ton, and it made everything that's happened since then that's good for me possible.
Well, Chris Shaw, it's been a great ride, both talking with you and the book itself. Thank you so much.
I am so grateful, Mitch. Thank you.
Chris Shaw's new novel is called The Manager. It came out last spring. That's when our interview first aired. He's also author of a number of other novels set in and around the Adirondacks as well. We interviewed him at Middlebury College last May. Ethan Shanty, where were you when the U.S. won the Miracle on Ice game in 1980?
I was 8 years away from being born. So
I have distinct memories of that game. I would have been 11 years old, and in fact, the game was played on February 22nd, 1980. My birthday is on February 23rd, so the next day when we got the newspaper, the February 23rd newspaper on my 11th birthday has all the pictures of the U.S. winning that game. So I always associate that game with turning 11. It was really exciting, though, and I remember being so charged up about that I talked my parents into getting me, like, it was the early days of being able to go someplace and buy things, like commemorative things. And I had, at some point in my collection, it was like a sweatshirt made by Levi's, which was one of the sponsors of the U.S. hockey team. And it was just like, it was a pullover sweatshirt that had the Olympic rings on it. And
I see.
USA 1980 on it. But yeah, I mean, all the kids, we were all imitating that game in our front yard and, doing Mike Eruzione, the guy who's diving in that picture. And it was, it was exciting times.
I have avoided hockey most of my life because I'm still mad that my parents wouldn't let me play.
I think we've talked about this before. My parents would have been okay with my playing hockey, but where I grew up, there was so little ice time. There were so few rinks that, like, the young youth hockey programs all practiced at like 5 a.m. and I had zero interest in practicing anything at 5 a.m. except sleep. To this day, in fact.
I had to wake up at 7 o'clock this morning. It's been brutal. My parents, I think, were pretty short-sighted in their decision to not let me play hockey because I probably wouldn't have been a good hockey player anyway, but their decision was entirely financial because they had no problem with me participating in sports, no problem with taking me to activities that I enrolled in after school. Never had any issue with that. They wanted to make sure that I was involved and an active member of my social scene, right? But I think they thought like music would be cheap. And
you just need some drumsticks. How much could drumsticks cost?
Yeah. And then, and then my first amplifier was, probably $600. And the first electric guitar that I bought for myself was $250, which isn't too much. But then the next one that I bought was $1,000. And then all the pedals that come with it are at least $100 a piece. And then you buy a drum set, and that could be a few thousand. And then anytime you break a cymbal, that's another $350. So maybe if they had just bought me hockey pads and I lost a tooth or two, I would have gotten out of the habit.
And it
early.
might have fostered a love for dentistry, and you might have been a zillionaire.
I would be much more financially sound now.
Ethan Shanty, we don't need to know about the folks' teeth, although now you're reminding me I have a dentist appointment in a couple of days. That'll be fun.
I hope that's fun.
Yeah. Who produces this show?
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, produced, and edited by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. Bill Hanel is our director of digital services. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, and our theme music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To hear more conversations and to support this show, visit ncpr.org/northwards. This is NCPR North Country Public Radio.
Shanty, 5 minutes for fighting.